Still a game, a power game, and not real dialogue. The Biden administration did a terrible job, but the motivation was to focus on Asia. In technology, there will be more decoupling. I don't think leaders in Beijing or Washington are that stupid. Alaska dialogue was very unsuccessful because both sides were not really trying to get a result. They were trying to position in terms of power. I think Wendy Sherman's trip was the first effort to try again, but without giving up that basic approach. And by all accounts, the response she got was no. If you want to cooperate with us on some areas, you have to stop criticizing us in other areas. And the US and US allies are not going to stop criticizing China on areas like Hong Kong and Xinjiang and East and South China Sea. So it's still, even with Wendy Sherman's visit, it's still a game, a power game, and not real dialogue. Chinese media saying, Taiwan cannot trust the United States, that is having the opposite effect, probably, of what the authors hope, because it's making people in Taiwan more nervous about Beijing's intentions, and therefore even closer to the US. And it's making the US and Japan and Europe and Australia and others more nervous about China's intentions and more supportive of Taiwan. First of all, acknowledge the Biden administration did a terrible job managing the exit from Afghanistan. One of the reasons Biden wanted to get out of Afghanistan so much was to focus on Asia. And he moved too quickly. And now he's having to focus more on Afghanistan. So that was a mistake. But the motivation was to focus on Asia. And before the withdrawal from Afghanistan, 2/3 of Americans said we should leave Afghanistan. But 2/3 of Americans said we should defend Korea and Japan and our allies in Asia. So they're totally different. So this Afghanistan withdrawal does not at all represent some isolationism or retreat from the world. It's the opposite. The Biden administration was trying to shift even more resources to Asia, but they did a bad job. The war for diplomacy creates fear. Smaller Southeast Asian countries are trying to hide, but middle and larger powers that are more confident are doing more with the US, like the Quad, like the NATO focus on China as a security problem. When we surveyed the American people and also American elites in all sectors, business, universities, labor, we asked about decoupling from China. Only 20% of American public or American elites favored complete decoupling. A majority favors some decoupling in technology areas, but not agriculture, not finance. So the US-China economic relationship is very intertwined and complicated. And actually, during the Trump administration, investment in China from the US, trade with China went up, despite the hard line. So it's a very complicated picture, but I do think in technology there will be more decoupling because of China's policies, really, because of Made in China 2025 and dual circulation. These are very threatening. And not every company, but many companies are cautious, but the Congress is quite worried about technology. So I think you'll see more decoupling. And I think you'll see similar trends in Europe, Japan, Korea, and more coordination. But how much decoupling, it'll be in areas that relate to new technologies like artificial intelligence or 5G, but not across the board, because only 20% support complete decoupling. And a lot of sectors, for example, farmers, they love the China market. And furthermore, most experts think the best way right now to deal with China's economy is to strengthen the rules-based order. The US should join CPTPP. The US should create free trade agreements with other countries. The Biden administration is not doing that yet, but and they won't lift sanctions, tariffs on China before they do that. The US during the Cold War never traded more than 1% of our trade with the Soviet Union. But now 15 to 20% of our trade every year is with China. So China does not want the international order to collapse. China wants more influence. And so in that sense, it's very, very different from the Cold War. But history does have examples where, because of bad decisions, countries moved to so much decoupling that they pursued autarkic empires and zero-sum global competition and ultimately war. I don't think leaders in Beijing or Washington are that stupid, or in Tokyo or London or New Delhi. And I personally think and actually support some greater technology decoupling because of concerns that many of us have about China's technology policies right now. But at some level, as the public opinion shows in the US and the elite opinion polls, 80% understand that complete decoupling and containment is crazy. It's going to be tapering off and measured decoupling. And the question is, and increased military competition and ideological competition. The question is, can we manage that? As the new National Security Advisor for Biden, Jake Sullivan, said, can we have competition without catastrophe? A change there would be helpful. And I suppose on the US side, really, what would stabilize US-China relations would be if the US invested more in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the World Trade Organization. The Biden administration is repeating the Trump administration's retreat from international economic statecraft. And although that economic statecraft would be motivated by competition with China, it would result in reinforcing international economic rules and agreements like CPTPP. And that would then be a basis for US-China discussions that's more pragmatic. But right now, the basis is for our dialogue is tariffs and mutual punishment, which is not, I think a much better basis is if the US has invested in the international economic statecraft with things like CPTPP. Competing with China will be the reason why we do it, but that actually will make it easier for the US and China and other countries to have dialogue.